Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Maul.
And that's going to be our NFL Week 3 breakdown. So we'll do it exactly like we did last week. We'll go game by game of the upcoming week. We'll sort of look back at the previous weeks. Heads up, we got a lot wrong. It was a major,
yeah,
it was a
so
bloodbath.
did everybody else, though. So we're not alone.
Except for Vegas with the Arizona pick. That's the one that I'm like, okay, well, Vegas knew what they were talking about, and I had no idea. I was out in left field. As soon as that, I think they were up like 14-0, and Pop sent out a message like, maybe we shouldn't bet against Vegas anymore.
But before we give Vegas too much credit, they also had the Bengals at the highest favorite week 1 and the Ravens as the highest favorite week 2, and they've both gotten upset. Not even covered, just straight upset. So it goes both ways.
It does go both ways. So with that, we'll get into it. Week 3 Thursday night game, which I will say the Thursday night games have been pretty good so far this year. I will say it. I felt bad for Tua. He goes down with
yet again.
What do you want to say? Like, I feel bad for the dude. It's one of those ones where I think he has a chance to make an NFL career, but I sit back and I go, how many more? Like, if he comes back for this and plays, it's like, well, what happens the next one? Like, is he done the next one? Is this like 3 strikes you're out? I don't know.
Dude, the scary thing for me is that it's like the couple before, it was like clear, he's getting tackled and his head was whipping around and bam, slams against the ground or something like that. But like this one, dude, it was just like a normal tackle, like it's that's the scary part, is that like it's getting worse, where it's like it doesn't have to even be this like mega hit, him going over the middle and getting popped by Vontaze Perfect. You know what I mean? It's just like he's just running and lowers his head and gets tackled and comes up looking like Frankenstein, and it's just like, dude, what? Like, that was just a normal football play. So that's where it's going to be like, I don't, he's already said he's not retiring, he's already on IR, but it's just like, dude, like at some point you got to just be able to play the game. You know what I mean? If he can't ever get tackled before, without getting a concussion, like that's just wild to me.
It goes back to, I remember we were talking about this, I think, in that running back episode, that sometimes it's just like a genetic thing, which I think speaks more to the difference of college to pros, like just how much harder they hit. That you have a guy in college, which he did have some injuries, but never the concussion side. And it's, you go from that one stage to this, where guys, just like you said, him and Hamlin, it looked like sort of a basic play, a normal tackle. But as soon as he started to get up, I was like, oh, he's knocked out. Like, you could tell the arm going straight.
Yeah.
It's just a different league at that point. And some guys genetically can't make it for whatever reason or another. And it's not so much like themselves. Sometimes it's just the unlucky break of you snap your leg. Numerous things can happen where your career's over in a matter of one play. So, but with that, Thursday night, we get the Pats versus the Jets. Right now, the Jets are a -6 favorite. That line, I think, just updated because it was 6.5. What's your initial thoughts on the Jets Pats?
So you'll hear me kind of talk about this. This is going to be the theme for me throughout the whole week. Is week 1, it's like you're kind of sifting through this, like, was that an overreaction? Was it just like a week 1 jitters, or everybody's kind of getting into the swing of things? When you see week 2 and you get kind of like, that's where it starts becoming a trend. It may not be a trend yet, but it starts becoming a trend, right? Because we have all these preconceived notions going into the season. Week 1, some of those get broken, some of them are surprising, but then when you see kind of week 2 happen, things start to make sense, where you're like, okay, this is who this team is going to be, unless we see some type of drastic turnaround. And for me, that's the Jets defense is nowhere near what they had been in the last 2 years, right? Like, I think all three of us have been hyping them up all offseason, going like, all they needed was a quarterback and they're literal Super Bowl contenders. And then they come out, keep their quarterback for at least 2 games, and it's like, ugh. They started the season not very strong. And then again against the Titans, who are, decent defense, but like offensively, and it's the Jets are just not the same defense. Their offense has improved, but the lack of defensive stops and turnovers that they had been getting makes them a much different team. And on the other side of the ball, I think a lot of us were expecting the Pats to be bottom 3 of the league, and they've shown up and had a pretty solid defense and have run the ball pretty well. So the Jets can't stop the run. That's going to be, I think, probably the main difference in the game, of if the Jets can just kind of slow down the run, because Jacoby Brissett's not like putting up amazing numbers, right? So if they can just kind of slow down the run, I think the Jets can and should win this one. But if we've seen what we have seen and Ramondre Stevenson goes off, I mean, I could see the Pats upsetting. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
It will come down to a ball control game for the Pats. Can they eventually, Aaron Rodgers with the receivers are going to click a little bit better on offense, and he will be able to create a little bit better situations for that decent defense. But I'm 100% in agreement with you. That defense, I get it week 1 against the Niners. You sit back, even without McCaffrey, it's still a good offense. It's San Francisco, it's the defending NFC champion at home. You can sort of give them a pass.
Exactly.
But then you go the next week and you're like, dude, we saw what Will Levis did week 1. He cost the Titans the game against the Bears, and surprisingly, he did it again with that lateral that I felt it was good to see a head coach just rip into a quarterback, because you could, you just knew how angry he was. It was like, we should have at least gotten 3.
Yeah.
Like, I can forgive a lot, but when you take points off the board because you're trying to do something that it's just take the yards that you had and live to play another down, he hasn't done that. We know what Will Levis is through a year and change of him being on the field. It's not good. For the Jets to struggle with the Titans as much as they did last week, the only thing for the Jets is I think they continually get better on offense. They'll figure themselves out. The only question I have for the Jets is, where have the defensive adjustments been? For Saleh to be as good as he has been in the past with the defenses, I just sort of sit back and I see the same look of him on the sideline. Like, it's just like staring off into the abyss. And it's one of those ones that now they lose Jermaine Johnson. It begs the question, are they going to go pay Hassan Reddick to now play, which I feel like they're in a position that you got to now. You have to get another defensive end.
Yeah, I don't think that story has been getting enough attention. I think it's kind of just this, and I think that's why Saleh is just kind of like, he's looking on, sitting on the sideline waiting for that defense that he's had to show up, and when they're not, he's kind of just like, what's happening? Like, what do I do? So, but again, that's what I talked about. Like, we gave them a pass for the Niners because you're like, it's week 1. It was the Niners. They are good. And then week 2, you're just like, all right, we're starting to see a trend here. And even if they win the game, but the Pats come out and run the ball down their throat, the Jets are in trouble defensively until they get Reddick back. Because, Rodgers looks good. Rodgers is slinging the ball great. He's maybe not as mobile or creative as he has been, but his arm talent is still clearly there, and he's getting the ball around the yard, but that defense is not helping him out.
Correct. For Jacoby Brissett, it's sort of interesting with all the different rookie quarterbacks. It's the clear reason why he's playing right now, because they just need a consistent, I can't afford a turnover with where the Patriots are at. They go out, they beat the Bengals, which no one really saw coming week 1. Last week, they took the Seahawks into overtime. They're not a bad football team. They're disciplined, but they're sort of that team. I think my dad has always talked about. They're sort of a C team, and they can give anyone an A game. But the second they step away from their A game, it doesn't take an A game from an opponent to beat them.
Correct.
They need some help to go their way, which they got in the Cincinnati game. A tight end fumbling right at the 1 yard line. Things that make or break their game. They can't just rely on their own talent to win, which is why the Jets are -6, in this game, a touchdown points favorite. But it would not surprise me. I have the Pats to at least cover in this game just because I'm not trusting that Jets defense until they prove me wrong. As you said, it's not, we had sort of a bias going in, but now after 2 weeks, I'm not betting on the Jets defense to show up.
Yeah.
All right, second game. Got the Browns and the Giants. Browns are -6. I feel like this should be more. The problem is you still have Deshaun Watson at quarterback for the Browns.
Which, I mean, he looked good last week. He I wouldn't say he was like, prime Deshaun what they signed, but he was a heck of a lot better than week 1. Week 1 it was just like, oh, call it in, ship him out, it's over with. So if he keeps progressing, I think they could be okay, because again, their defense is pretty solid. I think getting Nick Chubb back in a few weeks is like, couldn't come quick enough, honestly, for their offensive struggles. But their defense is still pretty solid. If there's ever like a game where he can, really kind of step up in the role and go, all right, I am getting better, this is the game, because the Giants are just awful on both sides of the ball. So,
and to highlight that, the Steelers kicker through 2 weeks of the NFL season has put up more points by himself than the Giants offense.
Yeah. So again, the Browns should win this one. This is another, it's like, would I be surprised if the Giants won? Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'd still be surprised, but it wouldn't shock me like the first week Bengals Pats.
Yeah.
Look, the Giants are getting better. It's hard to not be worse than you were week 1 after only putting up 3 points. The issue for the Giants is that for them, it's sort of like the Pats in terms of, you have a team, you have to have everything go right in the game to win. They saw that last week against Washington. I mean, their defense didn't let up a touchdown, but they got beat by field goals. And the fact that they didn't have a backup field goal kicker on the roster to try to just put up some points, like, I just sit back and I look at that and I go, your GM and your head coach, the fact that happened, that's a fireable offense in the NFL.
And I mean, like, the Giants are the same situation, if not worse, than they were before. Because it's like, who's their best player on offense now? Malik Neighbors, right? It's like, you need him to have an amazing game for them to even be close, which he had an amazing game last week. And they were close, but they still lost to the Commanders, right? So it's like, what's the difference between that Giants with Malik Neighbors versus the year prior with Saquon? It's the same thing. Like, Malik Neighbors is now just the Saquon, and they're not handing him the ball off. They're just throwing it to him, right? So, like, it's the same team. Like, Devin, I don't want to take away anything from Devin Singletary. Like, he's fine, but, like, he's not game-changing anything. You know what I mean? And, like, the Giants, the ultimate problem is Daniel Jones, and like you said, the GM and all that stuff. They don't have it. They're now that we're saying all this, they're going to go out and win just to prove us wrong the way the season has gone. But like, that's the problem with the Giants, is they're not improving anywhere.
100%. Why it should be the Browns. But as Vegas has shown, Vegas can be right and Vegas can be wrong, and we were mostly wrong last week. The next game, which I'll let you take the lead on because I thought that you brought up an interesting point when we were talking earlier, Titans-Packers. And your point goes back to the Packers last week against the Colts and sort of a surprising upset for them.
At least I was surprised, and a lot of people probably were, betting against Willis. I think even LaFleur was betting against Willis, but this is where LaFleur earned his money, and he just straight out coached the Colts. That game was won purely on LaFleur created the exact game plan that needed to be created in order for the Packers to win, and they executed it flawlessly. Willis didn't have this fantastic game. He played fantastically in the design, in the game script that LaFleur drew up for him, right? Like Willis has proven throughout his career, can't throw the ball. He's athletic, he can run, but he can't throw the ball. We all knew that. The Colts should have known that. The Packers knew that. That's why they ran the ball with Josh Jacobs 37 times, right? Like, so going into the game, knowing the game script, and the fact that the Colts couldn't stop it, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's a testament to the Colts defense isn't that good, which, I know they didn't have Forrest Buckner, which that hurts, but like, you should still be able to have someone, whatever, some type of game script where you're putting 8 guys in the box, 9 guys in the box to stop 37 runs up the middle. But so again, I don't know if it's a testament to the Colts being bad or the Packers really just being that good, and then having that type of head coach who can come up with those great game scripts. It is, the Packers are a good football team. Now, luckily for the Titans, I think they've seen that game script now, and it's going to be hard for LaFleur to kind of come up with the exact same game script and surprise Tennessee. And I also believe that Tennessee's front four, at least, is far superior to the Colts defense. So if they do try to run the ball 37 times, I don't think it's going to work out very well for them. But honestly, at this point, like, I don't know. I wouldn't touch it, from like a Vegas betting standpoint, just because, like, who knows? Like, the Titans have their own issues with Will Levis and all of that, but like, their defense is pretty solid. And obviously the Packers are a different team without Jordan Love, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad team. That just means they have to adjust their game plan. So I really don't know in this one. Based on what I've seen, the Packers defense is good enough that I think they'll still give Will Levis fits, and he's obviously super turnover prone. So that'll probably be the difference maker in the game. But again, if the Titans D can step up and just shut down the run where they're forcing Willis to throw the ball, that's probably not going to end up well for the Packers.
If I had to go with Vegas on one thing, the line is 36.5 for the total. That's one that I'm like, it's going to be under, just because both defenses should do really well. The only reason right now Tennessee's a -3, and I think the reason that is 4 is because the Titans at least know Willis pretty well. They got to see, just like you talked about last week, they know they're going to get a lot of the run. For the Titans on offense, it's just about Will Levis. Just don't make a mistake.
You stop turning the ball over.
Yes. You have D-Hop, you have Ridley, who's really shown out this year, especially on the fantasy side. He's putting up, wide receiver 1 numbers. You have Pollard, you have Spears. Just get us points, because our defense is going to keep us in the game. The Titans' defense, for as much as I was dogging them at the beginning of the year, looks good.
Surprising.
They're good defense.
Yep. This is where, again, going back to that game 1, you were like, ooh, I don't know. They looked pretty good, but maybe it was just a week 1 fluke because the other offense was bad. Week 2, they show up and you're like, okay, it's starting to be a trend. Titans got a good defense.
So I'm in the same boat of you. It's going to come down to whoever has the ball last. And whoever makes the mistakes in this game will lose. One turnover will decide this game because of how well both defenses play. It would not surprise me for the game to be 13-7, 13-6, just a real low scoring field goal type of game. 1 touchdown will probably win it.
Yeah, speaking of Ridley, I'll throw in my weekly plug of that's just another point of like why Trevor Lawrence is no good, because Calvin Ridley is clearly talented, and if he's getting it done with Will Levis, where was Trevor Lawrence?
I'll just go ahead and bring up this point now. She makes funny videos, that Annie Agar, with just the weak picks. Her line where she was like, the Detroit punter had more passing yards in the first half than Trevor Lawrence did. That, to me, sums up T-Law throughout. And we'll get to it when we get to the Monday night game of Bills-Jags, which we'll have a lot to talk about with T-Law, but stay tuned for later in the episode on that, because it's going down the path of what exactly Maul called, week 3 last year. But the next game, we've got Colts, Bears. Indy is -1. This one, to me, I go back to Sunday night. Did CW cost them the game in some areas? Yes. Was it all his fault? No. When you get pressured as much as he did, it's hard for a rookie quarterback to be able to make plays. Did he miss some open DJ Moores and other guys? 1000%. I'm not going to pull any punches and say that CW threw the ball amazingly. At the same time, I also sit back and go, he took an absolute beating that
Man
game.
was running for his life.
Yes.
And sometimes he didn't escape.
Yeah, most of the time he didn't. It was one of those ones that for him, it's about getting rid of the ball a little bit sooner in terms of when the play's ugly, just get to the sideline and get rid of it. Just get it back to the line of scrimmage, live to face another down, because it's a lot easier to convert a 3rd and 10 than a 3rd and 27 after you scramble and take a sack. Or you throw a pick in a triple coverage on the sideline like he did after one escape. For him in that offense, I just go back to they're trying to, which it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek statement. I want them to have like more quick routes. It's, we can't block. Let's get the ball out of his hand. The issue is that they can't block it so much to a detriment that DeAndre Swift's getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage, and it's creating long distance.
Yeah, they can't run the ball either.
So I know I sent you guys that clip, which made me laugh, of like Shannon Sharp just being like, and it's Justin Fields looking, being like, way better weapons, same results, because that O-line's trash.
That's what I was going to bring up, and like I'm not a Bears fan by any stretch of the imagination. However, I do really want to see CW succeed. But the hard part, especially for Bears fans, is it's the same situation. Like CW, arm talent wise, head and shoulders above Fields. Running ability, Fields is a better runner. I think maybe CW is sneaky, has good escapability. He's shown that in college, but he's also shown that type of play isn't going to fly in the NFL. So what he was able to do at USC isn't going to really happen in the NFL. But the main point is, like, a lot of Bears fans wanted to keep Fields because their whole argument was like, he's talented enough, he just doesn't have time. And then, like, there were a few times where he would have time and then would, like, miss the throw, and you're just like, oh, you're not really doing yourself any favors. And, like, I mean, just insert the other name into the same spot. Like, is CW making some throws where you're like, dude, guys, zip on the ball? Like, yeah. And then there's times where you're like, dude, the guy was open and you just missed him. But then there's other times where it's like, well, no wonder he's not throwing the ball well. It's like he doesn't have any time back there and he's running for his life. But again, it's just like, that's the same situation they were already in. They went out and set this team up for, like, CW to have the best, chance at being good. And then it turns out, well, just because they made the moves doesn't mean the moves were actually good moves, because that O-line still sucks. Like, and again, you brought it up. They can't pass block. They can't run block. Like, they can't do anything.
You made a good point in the text message, though. I need to pull that up, because what exactly you said, I thought, spoke a lot to the situation in terms of, we're trying to give CW a pass, but at the same time, you sit back and you go, well, you said, I think the biggest negative last night was the Bears were just almost as much pressure on Stroud, where he was handling it with ease, looking like a superstar. So yes, CW line sucks, but a true talent needs to be able to still function, which is true. Like,
yeah, because if you go back and look at that game, like, the Bears defense is good. I don't think there's any question about that. And they were getting pressure on Stroud. But somehow Stroud was rolling out, moving the pocket when he needed to, and still hitting guys downfield, and he looked cool and calm and collected doing it, where, like, CW was in a panic and just like, I'm tired of being hit the entire game. He looked like Andrew Luck back there. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that was the big difference, where you're just like, all right, if you want this guy to be that guy, he still needs to show up. Like there's a ton of excuses for him, but at the end of the day, like those only go so far before he starts just turning into a bust. Like he needs to step up his play.
100%. On the opposite side, you have the Colts, which they only managed to put up 10 points against the Packers defense. Packers defense is a good defense. But for me, it goes to that Anthony Richardson sophomore year. He has a cannon, but at the same time, he has this ability where he has this sort of the Mel Kiper perfect quarterback. He has all the talent in the world. The issue is that you saw it at Florida. There are times that he looks amazing, and there's other times that you're just sort of like, it could have been a lot better. For as good as the Colts offense is, they should have put up more than 10 points against Packers.
Yeah, they had a bad game.
They did have a bad game. The Bears defense is good.
Yeah, so again, that's where it's like they if they come out and have that same type of bad game, who knows? The Bears, because again, the Colts shouldn't get as much pressure on CW as the Texans did. So if they give him a little bit more time and he gets a little more connected with his receivers, it could be another L for the Colts, which is not looking good for me that I picked them to win the AFC South.
Oh, no. When we get to the midseason feedback, it's going to be pretty bloody because there's a lot of, someone picked the Rams to win the division, and it's not looking good for me. Next week, or the next game, we got Texans, Vikings right now. Houston's -2.5. I sit back. The question comes to me of, is Justin Jefferson going to play? Sam Darnold's looked amazing. I did find it funny that he went in the locker room and was talking to Kyle Shanahan of, that's what you get for cutting me. They played well, which you called it last week. You said, hey, remember San Francisco was riding this high, winning the mini, and everything started to change. They lost to the Browns, lose the mini. They had a 3-game losing streak. Purdy really didn't look good against that defense, which it's the same Niners team that made the Jets look really bad that the Vikings ended up beating. The Texans struggled. It was only a 6-point game with the Bears, of which that Texans defense really shut down CW. The Vikings have a far better offense than the Bears do right now. It's going to be a good game. This has all the potential to be the game of the week that no one's really talking about.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add there. I mean, that's spot on. Like both teams are playing well. They're definitely both beatable and have vulnerabilities, if you will, but it should be a good game.
All right, next game. We got the Eagles and the Saints. I sit back with the Eagles game. This, to me, is the Dan Campbell of games. You drive down. It wasn't a tush push in the first quarter. It was still like 4th and 4, and they went for it. And I sit back and I like taking the points early. Let's get on the board, and 3 points would have made the difference in the game. It would have been a 9-point game versus a 6-point game. There was no way for them to come back. Everyone's going to sit back and look at the Saquon drop. They harp on that way too much because that defense let Kirk Cousins go down like the Chiefs did against the Bills in the playoff game with 13 seconds left. It was just like, let's just not cover anybody and give them plenty of space and work their way up. They were down the field in under a minute, ready to score. So I sit back and I look at it and go, as soon as Mooney caught that long, like 40-yard pass, I was like, Eagles are done. They're going to lose this game, period. The Saints, on the other hand, can't stop scoring. For as much as we thought David Carr was mid, they can't stop putting up points.
This is another one of those, like, hey, 2 times it's becoming a trend on both sides of this game. Like, the Saints, this is the Saints team I thought was going to show up last year. I picked the Saints to win the NFC South last year because this is the team I thought was going to show up. Pretty solid defense. Derek Carr's not amazing, but he's got the experience and the leadership ability to get the ball where he needs to. And then they've got good offensive weapons. Like, this is that team. And like you said, I will say I think the line is the overreaction from both sides. It's like the Eagles just lost to the Falcons, and then the Saints just beat the Cowboys. So the Saints are the favorite. I think that's silly. I think the Eagles are going to win this game simply because, and you already alluded to it, they should have beat the Falcons. So you know, there's just one of those things like those kinds of mistakes don't typically happen multiple weeks in a row to good teams. Bad teams, Will Levis, yeah, he's going to turn the ball over every week. But like Saquon's not dropping that ball 9 out of 10 times. You know what I mean? And that would put the game out of reach. So, not that I'm not, giving the Saints credit, because the Eagles absolutely do need to show up. But I do think we need to pump the brakes on like they're not this like Super Bowl winning team yet. I just say yet. That being said, dude, the Eagles D has got to do something. They remind me of like the Commanders D from like 2 or 3 years ago, where they just have like on paper, just like nobody should ever score a point ever, like let alone gain a yard. But somehow, not only are they like not dominant, they're not good. Like Bijan was ripping off like 8-9 yards at a time, dude. And like to have those names on that front seven and to just be getting shredded is not boding well for them to like make a Super Bowl run.
Jalen Carter's biggest con, outside of the fact that Georgia guys can't be trusted behind the steering wheel of a car, is he would take plays off. That's what I see on the defense. When he locks in and plays his one play, he beats whoever he's lined up against, manhandles him. When he's put on one-on-one, wins the game. But then the next 2 or 3 plays, they walk through the motions. That's what I saw against them, especially on that fourth quarter drive. It was Cousins